I had just retired after 25 years of teaching at Cornell, and so her query provided me with a very agreeable opportunity to be self-centered and ruminate about the trajectory of my own writing career. To begin, I think you need to know something about the context that generated my second book, Fasting Girls, which is a history of anorexia nervosa. That's the book that first brought me into the world of trade publishing. The context matters because I was not driven by issues in American historiography as much as by my unique employment situation and the world in which I lived. In 1979, I was a newly minted PhD in American social and intellectual history, who was an affirmative action hire in Cornell's Women's Studies program. The year before, Cornell had received the Silver Snail Award from the National Organization of Women because it was the slowest Ivy League school in terms of hiring women. My appointment, however, was not just in women's studies. It was linked to an interdisciplinary Department of Human Development, which had been since the early 20th century a center for empirical research on child development and adolescence. By the late 1970s, the department was animated by what was called the human ecology imperative, associated with Joan Brumberg, a world-renowned psychologist, whose research on children in the United States and in Russia pointed to the importance of society and culture in explaining the way children learn and behave. My interest in anorexia nervosa was born in this environment. It was an environment that separated me immediately from the mainstream historical profession in which I had been trained. There were some costs in that separation, but also some extraordinary benefits. Because I never had to teach a period course, I began to rely less on strictly chronological frameworks and think more thematically in terms of historical issues that explained contemporary life. I offered courses like the history of childhood and adolescence that allowed me to work at the intersection of social history and human development, focusing on the origins of behavioral phenomena in contemporary children and families. At some point in 1980 or 1981, I began to think more seriously about a book on anorexia nervosa. Why? Because talk about the starving disease, as it was called by many, was bubbling up, not only in the media, Karen Carpenter actually dies a year later, but also in advising sessions and among friends. Invaluable conversations with Nancy Toms, who was my personal link to the history of medicine. I remembered that in my own college generation, back in the 1960s, no one worried about eating disorders. So I began to ask what accounted for this disjuncture, why so much anorexia nervosa now, did it have a history, and if it did, how had the disease changed over time? I know now that these are journalistic questions. These are things that I would have asked if I had been trained, I think, in journalism as well as history.